Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another ZipDeal conversation. This is where we get straight to tactics. We talk about what's driving real dealership profitability. And we're recording this episode with a very major event in the rearview mirror, the National Automobile Dealers Association Conference and Exposition. Some people call it NADA. Got to get Steve's thoughts on that. Is it NADA? Is it NADA? There's sometimes controversy of what your company will allow you even to call it. I know that from years past at a big company that cared about that. For the first time, though, ZipDeal was on the exhibit floor. And they were talking directly with dealer principals and GMs from across the country about the future of the car business and a whole lot more. So who better to unpack the biggest takeaways than the man who came up with the idea and built this solution to solve some of these very problems? Today, I'm happy to welcome back Steve Lindsay. He's not just the founder of ZipDeal, but a dealer operator himself. He knows this business inside and out, backwards and forwards. So we're going to move beyond just the buzz of the convention, talk about a bunch of stuff, but open the hood to see how dealers can transform some of that excitement into some of their business processes to build consistent revenue, long-term customer loyalty. If you want to know what sharp dealers are doing right now, and really a lot of what the buzz was around the ZipDeal booth, well, then tune in. Let's get into it. Steve, how you doing?
Great.
Good.
And it's NADA, by the way.
NADA.
I'm an NADA guy. You know, I hear NADA or NADA, and I'm like, I almost don't even know what they're talking about. That's all foreign. And of course, as you get closer to NADA, you hear people start to use those, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a East Coast thing, or it's some areas have adopted that.
It is sometimes an indicator of people who are very new to the car business. I did some content with a client who was very new to the auto business. We were having a conversation just like this where we video capture it, and the guy said, nada.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, I wanted to call that out right during our conversation, but I thought, nope, that probably would be inappropriate. But he said,
that's funny.
Yeah, we're hoping to go to NADA this year. And I was like, well, I think that's a different show than NADA, but it was crazy. Well, listen, the first thing I want to ask you is, coming off the show floor, a lot of talk at NADA was about future-proofing the dealership. Certainly, there was a lot of AI conversation as well. But as the founder of ZipDeal, how is the platform the strategic backbone that shields dealers from process inconsistencies that make post-sale delivery experience can be a challenge, but you want to have some thoughts around that. So I'm curious to know what you're thinking there.
Well, let me just say, I think NADA was great this year. I really loved what they did with the division with the North and West halls, and how they got all of the tech and the newer stuff kind of in that North hall, and then a lot of the legacy and the big companies in the West hall. I thought that was great, because really gave an opportunity for a company like ourselves that's smaller and just really getting started in that whole area to be a little bit of a bigger splash. And I wouldn't say a smaller pond, but I would say a more focused pond. I think people that were looking in that area were looking for the up and comers. And so it's pretty exciting. And I really felt like the turnout was great, especially compared to, what we saw down in Louisiana, New Orleans, with the snow, and which actually that show turned out decent considering how much they had to go through. But this was definitely a coming out, I feel like, for NADA, and I feel like they nailed it. So
it did feel like a rebound for sure. And I couldn't agree more. I had to spend a lot of time in both halls. And every time I went over to North Hall, it was busy, that you could feel the energy over there as well. And I think sometimes people are concerned with how Vegas is set up now, but I thought they did a really good job with that as well. And even when I came by your booth a couple of times, there were people in your booth. I couldn't even talk to any of your your folks because they
Sure.
were
Yeah.
engaged. Yeah. And so I thought they did a really good job with that, which is important. It's not inexpensive to participate in that regard. And so you want them to be thinking of ways that are valuable to that investment. So
Sure.
I was speaking with lots of dealer friends at NADA. There was some concern, and I'm curious to know your perspective about margin came up a couple of times. In
Mhm.
your
Yeah.
experience as a dealer and now a technology provider, what do you think is the biggest revenue leak in the post-sale process that ZipDeal was
Sure.
fundamentally designed to plug?
Sure. Let me say something about margin right now. Um, it is an issue industry wide, right? Your floor plan costs have never been higher, or they have been higher, but in recent years. And so dealers are feeling a little bit of that pinch. You got a lot of manufacturers that are driving the narrative on how much they need to sell, so they're taking a lot of those shorter deals. And as a dealer, right? We need margin, and I think sometimes dealers and staff can forget that. They get so focused on selling and they don't really look at, okay, well, what's my cost to sell a car? After I add my advertising, my floor plan costs, my labor costs, everything all in, what is my actual cost to sell a car? And that really is something that, we have to work on as an industry to sell from there up. But, I mean, you do have your F&I monies and of course, getting that unit in operation. So I think holistically, right, you can look at it. But when you look at just the car sale function of this and you look at how many leaks that there are things that are important for me as a dealer that a lot of my sales staff really don't care about. For example, the first service appointment, right? How does that really benefit the salesperson? And yeah, sure, we all understand that unit in operation and building that long-term relationship is important, but a lot of our sales staff, they don't think in that arena. They're thinking in the immediate and now. And so for me as a dealer, right, that is a critical foundational thing that we just cannot miss at the time of sale, right? Accessory sales. A lot of reason salespeople don't sell accessories is because it's kind of a hassle. They got to make sure that the part's in stock. Then they got to coordinate, getting the work done and making sure that it gets done timely. And then it's delaying the car deal and all of that stuff. And so a lot of times they just don't do it, or you have a completely separate staff that helps facilitate and get that done because it is such a hassle. Well, it costs money. And to be frank with you, to me, I wish there was more margin in accessory sales. And that's something that I think, that dealers need to work with the manufacturers on. But the point is we know that customers are going to buy accessories. Why aren't they buying from us as dealers? And I think a big part of that is because we're not asking for that.
Mhm.
And so when you look at a lot of the leaks, and those are just two very simple examples, but with what we're looking to do, me as a dealer, but then also as a software vendor, right? If I can help capture more of that revenue, the customers are going to spend that money somewhere.
Yeah.
But if I can capture more of that at the dealership and then also raise my products per deal and my F&I PVRs and, build a better relationship with the client. I mean, now I've got a winning formula that I can capitalize more on this wonderful thing, which is a new car franchise that has already baked in car buyers that are wanting to come and buy my products. Yet it's not so much just about the car, but it's more so about the car, the accessories, the F&I products, the long-term relationship that we have with them, the auto insurance, all of the loose ends that we're able to capture more so in doing that through the ZipDeal software system.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things about ZipDeal that I personally, I really, really love. And you said something I think is really a case for many dealers. Your sales staff, at least most of them, see one-time opportunities every time they're selling a car. You, as an owner, see the lifetime value of these people. So you know that having something like ZipDeal in a very crucial part of the process actually helps to create that long term. It's not just additional value in that sale, but it's also giving them an experience that makes them want to continue to work with you because they are fearful that they're never going to have an experience like that in other places.
Yep.
And that becomes something really powerful when you're elevating the experience of your customers and at the same time introducing things that bring in more profit and more opportunity for the store. So I want to talk a little bit about that, or get your thoughts a little bit. That we talk about this in regards to ZipDeal quite a bit. The F&I wait time is like a timeless pain point for people. It's not new. Everyone knows about it. So, and we've talked about this before, but how does ZipDeal manage that customer's emotional state during the critical F&I handoff to drive, like we were just saying, better product, accessories penetration,
Yep.
first service point, like all that? Those are key priorities for dealers. Like, what are your thoughts there? How does ZipDeal help?
Well, I mean, the F&I wait, I mean, I think dealers have been trying to address that for 20 years, right? Unfortunately, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Um, I just got another arbitration agreement from my attorney, that's updated. I mean, there's more forms, there's more paperwork. This fraud has really created a little bit of a wrinkle in how do we pick up efficiencies in finance. So, with that being said, it's like, why don't we just try to capitalize on this downtime, right? Let's try to have the customer help us through the process. And so, after the negotiation process has taken place and the salesperson's getting all of the paperwork and the vehicle ready, customers usually sitting there waiting. And it's 30, 45, 60, I hate to say it, sometimes longer at my dealerships on a Saturday. And if we can get the customer involved, right? Customers want to help. And you know what? Nowadays they have, because of the digital interactivity that we have in our car buying, well, in our retail buying experiences now, they're much more involved in most retail transactions. So because of the complexity of a car buying purchase, then why don't we leverage that and put more of that on the responsibility of the customer while they're waiting? And so there's basically 10, 12 minutes of interactivity that we have with the customer digitally in the ZipDeal PDS that allows them to give us very important information to help wrap this deal up. But then also they're educated on potential F&I products. They're going to go ahead and schedule their first service appointment. They're going to go ahead and peruse and see what those accessories are for their new vehicle. They're going to download the OEM app. All of these loose ends that we need to get done before that customer leaves is done in this PDS workflow. And the benefit to the customer is now, instead of a salesperson begging for a good score because they don't want to lose their bonus, that customer is actually going to give them a good score because the dealership processed, earned, and deserved it. And when you really think and understand how CSI and how it's evolved from a very simple net promoter score, I question the value of a lot of these old legacy scoring systems because A, the burden is extremely high on the customer, and B, at the end of the day, like if we just want to know if they would recommend us or not, then now we know the value. Well, that's easier to gain than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then the question really becomes, how do we take that data as a dealer and translate that into a real temperature of what our customers are feeling? And I have to tell you that if you read any book on Net Promoter Score, they will tell you never, ever coach those scores. Why? Because you want to know the real score.
Yes.
And yet manufacturers are putting all this pressure on us to come up with good scores. And I believe that a lot of it's happening through manipulation, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
And so, when you have a system like this that's embedded, you're going to get a temperature of that customer prior to them leaving the dealership. And that's one of the things that we do in ZipDeal.
Yeah.
Is we get a grade from that customer halfway through the process that says, how we doing? 1 through 5, give us a score. If we're doing anything less than a 5, the general sales manager, the general manager, the sales manager are going to get a text alert on their cell phone that says, Mr. Smith is having a less than a 5-star experience. You might want to go out and talk to him. See, we're in the proactive business, but again, because we're digitally engaged with that customer and we have that ability to communicate with them in real time, we can collect that kind of data and then share it with the dealer to help them get a real net promoter score that is invaluable, that adds real feedback to the temperature of how they're doing as a dealership.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. Trust is earned. You said you can't if you try to manufacture those responses from people, then you're right. It becomes manipulation tactics. It's gaming. You're trying to game a system that the OEMs have had in place for so long. And it's a point of pressure that they put on dealers and have for so long without ever evolving the thought process or the tool set, or how can you actually make this more of a truly organic affinity that gets built with the customer around the brand. You have to earn that. And I know that you guys do that in your regular operations, but I also know that ZipDeal helps do what you just example of, like, hey, if something's going off the rail, there are alerts. We're making sure that that customer is, that they are having a good experience. I mean, to be able to mitigate that potential, I'm not giving you 5 stars long after they've left over the curb. That alone is something that I think every dealer should pause and say, that I should probably put ZipDeal in just for that, let alone all the other features. I want to lean in a little bit on service. The service retention has been something that's, it's always been really, really important. But the last handful of years, it's continued to become really a big topic. And when I talk with dealers, they bring that up quite a bit. Would you walk us through the non-negotiable steps ZipDeal automates to make sure that every customer is introduced to the service department? We talked about that, scheduling first service, and has that first appointment set before they're leaving your store.
Yeah. So your new car customers is a great example, because we know that they're going to service their Honda or Toyota or Ford, likely at a Ford dealership if they bought it new. Now that's not the way it is, but your chances of them servicing at an OEM dealer is much higher. And so we know that we want to schedule a first service appointment. For your used car customer, it just depends on the dealership, right? So if it's an off make model of what the dealership sells, they may or may not try to schedule that first service appointment. Or if that customer is outside of a threshold of 60 miles or something, they may not go for that first service appointment. But because we can, in the system, have that flexibility, now we know that everybody that we're asking for that first service appointment is relevant to actually being able to service with our dealership. And so, basically it just starts to become part of the workflow, right? The customer understands, oh yeah, I'm going to have to service this. Great. Well, how do we know when you're actually going to need to be able to service that, right? Well, I mean, we have our models. We know that based off of some of the data that we collect from the customer, which is either through the F&I interview process, because one of the questions is how many miles do you drive a year? And then we put that into this model that basically says, okay, well, they're going to be due for service in 7 months. I can only speak to our dealership today, but I would imagine this is how it works at most dealerships. So we go ahead and schedule that first service appointment for 7.5 months out, at which point, as we get closer to actually scheduling that appointment, our service BDC will firm that appointment up. And we all know that this is a first service appointment, so it's a loose appointment, right? Now, we do integrate with Xtime and My Karma and all the DMSs for this, so it is integrated in there. But it's important that your service BDC or your service advisors know that this is a first service appointment, because it's going to be a somewhat of a loose first appointment that we've got to nail down. But I can tell you, when you look at the business model of a dealership, that long-term unit and operation relationship with this customer is paramount to the long-term sustainability of the car dealer. And I cannot rely on people that are not paid off of the revenue of my service department to do something for my service department that is paramount to my dealership. So with that being said, yes, I can spiff them. Yes, I can beg them. Yes, I can penalize them if they don't set a first service appointment with the customer, or I can just do what's the easiest thing to do and allow the customer to do it themselves inside of the ZipDeal PDFs. And that's exactly what we do. And so, we have a take rate of 92% first service appointments. And, using the data in my dealership alone, right? Greater than 50% of those are rescheduled to another date, and a little bit less than 50% actually show. I'll take it all day long. Absolutely. Because with the amount of cars that we sell and the units in operation that I already have in place, and I can add 50% of my new and CPO sales on top of that, the numbers become astounding. And it's all just in capturing this one very simple, important thing with that first service appointment.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about something that's quite a competitive advantage. This past summer, you were awarded a patent. Dealers were walking all around at NADA looking at all kinds of different tools. I'm sure very few that actually had a patent. So
Yeah, I gotta show this.
Yes.
This is so cool. This is what the federal government sent me.
That's amazing.
And I tell you, you can look it up online. It really is cool. But I mean, like, this is all federally protected. And, they basically map it all out. But I got to say, man, I really was impressed with the whole process.
Yeah, you got to be really proud of that.
And to be awarded a United States patent truly is just, it was a very special thing for me as an American citizen and as somebody who has a lot of respect for this country to be able to receive one of these. So, yeah, lots of fun there.
Yeah, once again, congratulations on that. Without giving away any like trade secrets, what's the quick rundown on like what the patent covers?
So it's basically the software and that workflow of exposing all the customers to all these different functions of the actual what we call PDS, pre-delivery system. And so part of the reason that I wanted to protect this is because it is novel. It's much more complex than what you see at the face value to pull off everything that we're doing behind the scenes. But at first glance, it looks fairly simple. And part of that's by design, right? We don't want it to be a complex process for our customers. However, to get this to actually work and add value to the dealership, the salesperson, and to the customer is pretty complex. And so, basically making sure that we took the time to spell that all out, that whole workflow, as well as the software interfaces and all of that. That's basically what's protected.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. Since you told me about it last summer, I've been super happy for you. It's got to give you that sense of pride, and just to hear you talk about how you can connect that to the country that you live in and taking pride in that, it's just awesome. And I hadn't seen that before, so thanks for showing that on camera. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I didn't expect the federal government to send you something so fancy.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm sure that there are other people out there other than just myself that are really impressed with that, but because you went through that, and I have had several colleagues and friends and peers that have gone through patent process, some awarded, some not. It's not like, submitting for, a warranty claim or something. It is a very long, detailed process. And so you deserve a lot of recognition for that. So again, kudos. I want to ask you a little bit about something that I don't know if I have asked before. Beyond the customer, NADA talks a lot about staffing crisis. The whole industry has been talking about that in various parts. And it's maybe changed a little bit in the last couple of years, but I think still a challenge for a lot of dealers. Is there a way that ZipDeal can kind of uniquely create an internal recruiting channel
Yeah.
by enabling customer referrals, perhaps for employment? Have you seen things like that? Can you speak to
Oh,
that a
yeah.
little bit?
Yeah. Again, one of my modules that's inside this PDS, um, who better to come work for you than somebody that's choosing to do business with you
Mm.
and give you their hard-earned money. And so, in this day and age of just staff shortages, why don't we at least solicit and ask, one of the 1,000 people a month that are going to do business with us, why don't we ask them if they would be interested in coming to work for us? And it's a very simple, hey, we have employment opportunities here. Would you be interested in coming to work for us? Or know someone that would be. And then we give them a list of kind of like the areas where they think they might fit in. And a- funny thing is, just this year, I've hired two people out of that process, and it's in February. Now, I think part of that is because it's the time of year where people are thinking, "Hey, reset. I want to do something new."
Mhm.
But it absolutely is a process that works, and it works very well.
I think that's just another one of the secret weapons within ZipDeal. That's why I wanted to ask you a little bit about it,
Yeah.
because I think it's one of those points that dealers probably aren't thinking about. They're probably thinking about some of the other things, like schedule for a service appointment. Let's mitigate people getting upset in the dealership while they're still there. Like there's a lot of those.
You know what? I think dealers have been thinking about this for years, honestly.
Mhm.
I mean, that's where I learned about it from.
Yeah,
It's how do you pull it off?
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about ZipDeal PDS. These are all dealer ideas.
Mhm.
I didn't come up with the first service appointment,
Yeah,
right? These are all things we know we're supposed to be doing.
yeah,
It's how do we actually pull it off? And so I say that the opportunity is for me to set across the table from every one of my car buyers and ask them very important things that are going to help the business and the relationship with them. That's what this PDS system does. It allows me to have a seat at the table with every single one of my clients to make sure that they get the same process, same questions, same everything before they go in the finance office.
yeah, yeah. It's fantastic. I want to ask you a little bit about like some maybe top three things that you could think of in this regard. If a dealer principal or a GM, let's just say anybody who's influencer or a decision maker stopped by the ZipDeal booth at NADA, maybe they got some information, took some notes, they haven't made a decision yet. And let's just also throw in all the dealers who may see the bite size of this full conversation, but they're thinking, well, okay, what's ZipDeal? From your perspective as a dealer, what would be like the top three reasons you would tell them ZipDeal is going to be a good solution for you, how to capitalize on insights, and that could be for the person that maybe did meet you guys at an ADA or just a dealer who's now curious about the things that you're talking about.
So for the dealer that wants to get a handle on a lot of the loose ends of a car buyer and do it efficiently and add value to them and increase their PVR and increase the long-term sustainability of their dealership and have a better outcome with CSI and with potential other things that we address, such as fraud, employee referrals, customer referrals. If you want to get that all baked into one very simple, streamlined system that adds value to the sales person, to the customer, and to the dealership, then sign up for ZipDeal. It works.
Yeah. Okay, I got a couple more questions for you before I'm going to let you go back to your real job.
Yeah.
um, Reputation, the pressure to manage CSI. We already talked about it just a few minutes ago. It's constant, never ending, and it's extreme at times. How does ZipDeal's pre and F&I like pulse check allow the GM to intervene? You mentioned a little bit, but give us a little bit of a kind of a scenario where that feature provides immediate value in protecting the online reputation of the store.
So online, right, a customer will give you a 5 or they give you a 1. Okay. I mean, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
And, you know, the rule of thumb is, right, you got to have X amount of fives to bury that one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so what have we been trained to do? Get as many fives as you can. You know, pay plans are tailored around that, and communications with the customers are tailored around that. And you know, a lot of that's just like, okay, well, give us some feedback. What's nice about us checking the pulse in that same 1 through 5 star rating is customers are much more likely to give us a 4 or a 3. They're still doing business with you. They're just maybe not getting that 5 star level of experience versus a 4 or a 3 star. And so, what's beautiful about it is the timing of it is a part of the process. We're, you know, probably over halfway through, and now we get to take a pulse of that customer. Most people give us a 5, right? They're still happy. But if they're not, right, the chances of them giving you a 4 or a 3, to really get a real understanding of where that customer's feeling is pretty high. And so, you know, like I said earlier, gives the GSM, the general manager, sales manager, an opportunity, because they're going to get a text alert and say, Mr. Smith only had a 3-star experience so far, to really kind of pop in there and just, you know, save the day. You know, when you go to the restaurant and the manager walks by and says, how is everything? Why do they do that? Right? Well, they do that because they value you as a client, and they do want to make sure that if there's something that needs to be addressed, that it's addressed. Yet in the dealership world, on a $50,000 transaction, we don't do that. And the reason we don't do that is we don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
And so if we can do that in the system, by the way, Sean, you could have done this 10 years ago. The market wasn't ready. People weren't ready. They would have been offended if you had asked them digitally these questions. Nowadays, they watch us run around like chickens with our heads cut off, you know, trying to do all this stuff. And they're like, can I help you somehow? Right? And the answer is yes, they can. It's through this PDS software. But the point is that if we can take the pulse of the customer digitally, and they'll do it in real time, now we can bring that manager in just to say, hey, you know, just want to check in. Everything going okay? I got some feedback that maybe there's something that we're not living up to. How can I help? And believe you me, when a customer gets that kind of response, and they've communicated they need a little bit of help, man, your loyalty goes off the charts. And we all know this. It's just, how do we scale it? And this is how we scale it. You scale it through the ZipDeal PDS.
I love that you mentioned loyalty, because I don't think enough businesses, not just automotive, actually work to earn it. And we've heard for so many years that loyalty is dead. And I just, you know, as a Gen X dude, I'm like, that's not true. There are brands that I am loyal to because of how hard they work to earn it. I would be distressed to have to not be able to use them. That's how much of loyalty they have built. But it takes effort, and ZipDeal clearly is a tool to help in that process too. I just got one last question that I want to ask you. Now that you've had a successful run at the largest dealer conference, what's your mindset for the future? What are you thinking? What are you excited about? Anything just from the store perspective, from ZipDeal perspective? Where's your thoughts as you think about the rest of 26?
Yeah. Well, we're going after it. You know, ZipDeal's been around for a few years now, but NADA was our first real splash. You know, my personal credibility is very important to me. The last thing I want to do is not have this thing fully ready for the market. And so that's really what we've done over the last, you know, 6 years that I've been developing this, but then more so, you know, tailoring it in with some of the increased modules and things that we've done. But with NADA being our big splash, yeah, we're full tilt going after this. The market needs it. The dealers are very receptive to it. They get it. Any demo that we do, dealers get it. It's very reasonably priced. I'm a dealer. I understand. I hate when vendors bring me things and they say, oh, just sell one more car. It doesn't work like that. I know what net to gross is. I know how we have to move the bottom line. And if I can help these dealers get what they want, the rest of this will fall in place. And so if we serve the client, the car buying client, we serve the dealer, and we serve the salesperson, the rest of this falls in line. And that's really what we're seeing start to take hold. So I'm excited about 26. The team's lined up and ready to rock, and this is going to be a great pivotal year for us as a company.
Love it. Audience, that brings us to the end of another insightful conversation right here with Steve Lindsay himself. If there's one thing to take away from this discussion and from the entire NADA conference, it's that the gap between high performing and average dealerships is no longer defined by inventory or location. It's really defined by consistency of their process, having the right tools in your hands, and in this case, even a tool that can be in your customer's hand, because as Steve so articulately laid out for us, they do want to help. The customers want to help in the process. Steve's perspective as both dealer and an innovator makes it clear that the future of profitability is really in automating those disciplines to ensure that every customer gets that perfect revenue maximizing experience. So, Steve, again, big thanks for joining us today and sharing all these awesome insights. To the audience, if you're ready to see how ZipDeal can transform your dealership's delivery process, eliminate profit leaks, future-proof your retention strategy, visit their website, go to zipdeal.com, explore their YouTube channel, connect with Steve and his team on LinkedIn. I like to say this at the end of every episode. Just go to LinkedIn, find ZipDeal's corporate page, their company page, then look at all their people, and then you can connect with all of them. They're all fantastic people to be connected with in your network because they're good people, smart people, and probably most importantly, at least in my opinion, they're all experienced people. They didn't just get into the business yesterday. So you want to connect with them, and then you can get a demo and take the next step. You will not be sorry you did. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Until next time, keep building consistency that drives real results. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.